I noticed something in the Rambam, in Hilchas Teshuva, that I never noticed before. By way of introduction, there's a minute to learn Hilchas Teshuva in the Rambam during Aseret Yemei Teshuva, one parak a day. There are 10 prakim to Hilchas Teshuva, and there are 10 days of Teshuva, beginning with Rosh Hashanah and ending in Yom Kippur. But the truth is, I never get too far. I get stuck in the first chapter, and I never get out of the first chapter. But this time, maybe it's the influence of my wife, who told me to do Daf Yomi. So I've been doing Daf Yomi now for, I don't know, when did we start? Like 3-4 years ago? And I hope I'll make it to the finish line, although I'm not looking forward to Menachas, and neither. But anyway, so I got used to this kind of, Daf a day kind of thing. So I was looking at a parak a day in the Rambam. And all of a sudden, like we say here in Israel, Hay Simon Yarad, there's something just clicked, like a light flashed. The Rambam, all over, and I'm studying extensively Hilchas Talmud Torah. I got back into it after 20 years. I left it. The Rambam is very sensitive to what we call seder. And that word seder means many, many different things in the Rambam. Number one, it means each parak, the first parak comes before the second before the third. There's a certain logical sequence. Seder also means there's a logical sequence within each chapter of the Rambam. So what the Rambam brings down in Halacha Aleph has to come before what he brings down in Halacha Tesvav. And Seder in the Rambam means that if the Rambam divides up what we think is one halacha and he brings it down in two different halachas, even if they're contiguous one to the other, it means you have to come up with an explanation and justify it. So what I did was, I began to, as I learned each chapter in the Rambam, and now I got up to chapter 7, I wrote myself a little note summarizing the main points and the themes in that chapter. And I noticed the following. Chapter 1 has to do with what's called mechaprim. I'll explain. Right? A carbon is mechaper, and Malchus is mechaper, Yisurim, Rachman Lutzana mechaprim, the Sarel Azazel is mechaper. And the Rambam writes about every mechaper that it's contingent on tshuva. So there's no such thing as a mechaper, says the Rambam, without tshuva. And that's why all the memisim, they have to recite vidui before they're executed, etc., etc., etc. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is dedicated to what I call the Maisa Tshuva. What are the various parts of tshuva? You've got Charot ala Ovar, you've got Aziva Sachet, you've got Kabbalah Asid, you've got Vidui. And the Rambam goes into detail about each one of these stages, if you will, or segments of tshuva. That's the Maisa Tshuva that you can see in Perek Beis. Then I got up to Perek Gimel. Perek Gimel is dedicated to understand what is the judgment of Yom Kippur and how the Chiv Tshuva of the rest of the year changes, and there's a unique Chiv Tshuva on Yom Kippur. That's chapter 3. Chapter 4 is Ma'akvin. There are 24 different scenarios which prevent you or make it very difficult, almost impossible for you to do tshuva. So, for example, if you steal from the Rabbim and you don't know who to return the object to because, you had bad scales or whatever it was, you sold, you don't know who was stolen, it's ma'akiv hatshuva. Then we get to Perek Hey and Perek Vav. And these two chapters, the Rama goes off on a whole different story. And basically, his theme or the motif of these two chapters is what's called Bechira Chofshit, free choice. And the Rambam asks a kasha. He says, how could it be that man has freedom of choice? God knows exactly what we're going to choose. And once God knows it, it's absolute truth, and you can't deviate from the truth. Then already today, you are forced to do tomorrow what God knows you're going to do tomorrow. And the Ravid goes ballistic. Why did the Rambam even ask such a question? We'll never understand the answer to this. The Rambam offers his answer. Lo machshavosai k'machshavosai kem. And, God's knowledge is not separate from God. It's one entity. And then the Rambam has a whole discussion about Paro and Vayichabed es libo, Vayachbed es libo. How could Paro have been punished for his, the last couple of makkahs and so on and so on, when God, he didn't have freedom of choice. And the Rambam tries to work very hard to explain it. Now, when I get to Perek Zayin, I feel like I'm about to fall off a cliff over here. What do I mean? The Rambam has already covered all of Hilchas Teshuva in the first 4 prakim. He took what I call some sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? A digression, if you will, in chapters 5 and 6, addressing the issue of freedom of choice. Now, he opens chapter 7 with the words, Hol v'reshus nitnel adam. Man is given the choice to choose between good and evil. And therefore, the Rambam says that he should yishtadel kol adam lasos tshuva. Everybody has to do tshuva. Hol v'reshus kol adam nesunalo is yishtadel kol adam lasos tshuva. Again, the Rambam is connecting the reshus nitnalo, meaning the freedom of choice, with tshuva. I'm bothered by this. As I said, the Rambam is very careful about his seder. If tshuva is predicated on freedom of choice, you could have chosen between good and evil, and chas v'sholom, you made the wrong choice, then do tshuva. I mean, it doesn't make sense to obligate a person to do tshuva if he had no freedom of choice. He doesn't deserve any punishment. So it would seem to my mind, and please shoot me down if I'm wrong, but it seems to my mind that the Rambam should have opened up Hilchas Tshuva with a whole discussion about freedom of choice. Because the Rambam Perek Zayin says, Hoil, since it's freedom of choice, therefore do Tshuva. Joe?
Well, and just the Ravs, I don't know. I would think I probably got it when the Ravs talked about the Rambam's halachas. A lot of the times, doesn't he in the parakim, doesn't he seem to digress sometimes? But it's not really a digression. In other words, when the Rambam talks about the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, right? So he begins with the halachas of Talmud Torah, and it's only till and then later on he gets into the concept of Keser Torah, which really should be at the beginning. But he starts with a simplistic way of talking about the mitzvah, and only later on in later parakim does he get more in depth into what he's saying.
Keep in mind, the reason why Keser Torah can only come in Perek Gimel of Hilchas Talmud Torah and not at the beginning is because a person is obligated in Talmud Torah on that level, universally for every single Jew, with or without Keser Torah. Keser Torah is a special madrega which the Rambam has, and the Rambam might even postulate that someone who aspires for Keser Torah is not included in the rest of the population. Therefore, he doesn't have to go to work, and so forth and so on. Then you have to connect the Rambam here with Hilchas Shemitah V'Yovel. But what I'm asking is a slightly different question, Joe. If the Rambam felt, and I emphasize the word hoil at the beginning of Perek Zayin, that the entire enterprise of tshuva is predicated on the belief, the fundamental belief of our faith in freedom of choice, it would seem to me that there's no room for tshuva without freedom of choice. So it's not like you're talking about Kesed Torah, which is a high madrega that the Rambam, designates, or it's the exclusive property of someone who has achieved all of the 3 prakim of Talmud Torah. Now we could say he's ready for aspiring for Kesed Torah. But, I wouldn't say the Kesed Torah is the introduction to Hilchos Talmud Torah, not at all. On the contrary, I would say the Kesed Torah is for the exception. The Rambam writes, Al Aretz Tishan, he's sleeping on the ground, and he's like our chayalim out there. He's totally dedicated to Torah. He's got nothing else. The Rambam even writes in Perek Gimel in Kesed Torah Lo Yasiach Daito. But in Teshuva, it would seem to me that what the Rambam is telling me with the word Hoil is that the rug on which we're standing with regard to Teshuva and the possibility of Teshuva, the meaning of, is Bechira Chofshit. If that be the case, then put your cards on the table. Now, I don't want to believe in Bechira Chofshit. God knows what I'm going to do. That's the steer of Yediyah and Bechira. So the Rambam should have raised that and ironed it out, lo machshir, whatever, as an introduction to Hilchos Teshuva. Okay, I want to ask one other question here before I go on. The Rambam writes in Perek Zayin, again after the 2 chapters on freedom of choice, Al tomar she'ein tshuva el me'avero she'esh behem ma'aseh. Don't entertain the idea that tshuva is limited to those sins that require action. Ella, kishem she tzorech adam loshem be'elu, kachu tzorech lechapes b'deos ros sheyesh lo lashuv min hakas u'min ha'eva min hakol tzorech lachzor b'tshuva. Now wait a second. We said that the Rambam in the 2nd chapter of Hilchos Teshuva has covered all the laws of the Ma'aseh Teshuva. What is Teshuva? And in Perek Aleph, he opens up by saying that when a person is guilty of violating the Torah, he's chayav in Teshuva. If the Rambam holds that you're chayav in Teshuva for violating even deos, right? You know what deos means? Deos means midos in the Rambam. So you have the mid of kas and so forth and so on. Then that should have been in Perek Aleph, or maybe maximum Perek Beis. What happens all of a sudden, Dermant, the Rambam reminds himself in Perek Zayin. So basically, I'm asking 3 questions. It's all the same. First of all, the Rambam already covered Hilchos Teshuva. Why does he have another parak now to cover Hilchos Teshuva when he finished Hilchos Teshuva? He already went on to Bechira Chofshit. Secondly, if the Rambam holds Bechira Chofshit is the fundamental basis for Teshuva, he should have introduced Hilchos Teshuva by telling me about the philosophical belief, the religious tenet of the faith that we have freedom of choice. And thirdly, why does the Rambam introduce in Perek Zayin the fact that Teshuva is required not just for Maisim, but also for Midos? Okay. Now, I have a principle. It's almost like, by me, one of the fundamentals of the faith, that a good Jew will answer a question with another question. So I have another question on the Rambam, and this really bothers my mind. Like, until now, I'm bothered by the Seder HaDvarim. But right now, I'm going to present to you my real problem, which I think has to be answered, although I don't think you can answer it. But it's a real problem. The Gemara in Masechta Yoma on Pei Vav Amid Beis brings 2 quotes, 2 statements of Reish Lakish. And the Gemara points out they contradict one or the other. Amar Reish Lakish, Gedola Teshuva says donos nasos lo ki shgogos. How great is tshuva that if you do tshuva on a mazid, that's called zdonos, you were deliberate, then God considers that chet as if you did it b'shogeg unintentionally. Shenema shuva l'Hashem Elokecha kasher kashalta bavonecha. So the word kashalta, which we read in the Haftorah just a few days ago from Hosea, the word kishalta means shogeg. So you're considered a kishola, like somebody is not careful when he walks on the street and he trips. So that's called a kishalon, nichshal, right? There's a whole sugi of avakama where the nichshal is posher or not posher. Anyway, that's a shogeg. So the Gemara says, Eini, is it really so that according to Reish Lakish, Zdonos nasislo kishgagos, va'am Reish Lakish gedola tshuva d'zdonos nasislo kizachayos. That a chet b'mezid through tshuva now is transformed to a zchus. Shogeg is an avera. Shogeg is a lower level of chet. Right, when we say chatonu, pashadu, and so forth, maradnu, marinu, is chet means shogeg. You have to do tshuva on shogeg. And there'll be punishment for sure. But now, Reish Lakish is saying, nasim lo kizachios. It's like he gets credit for his mazid. Positive credit. Now, we have in the Gemara the following fundamental distinction. Lo kasha, says the Gemara. Kan mi ava, v'kan mi yira. There are two categories of tshuva. I'm going to switch the order around. There's tshuva mi yira, on what shall we say a lower level, and then there's a higher level of tshuva mi ava. When Reish Lakish says nasim lo kishgagos, he's talking about kashalta. Kashalta means you did it b'shogeg. It's nasim lo kishgagos. What kind of tshuva does Reish Lakish have in mind when he says nasim lo kishgagos?
Yira.
Excellent, tshuva miyah. However, there's a higher level of tshuva, which is called tshuva me'ava. And here is where Reish Lakish says, Nasir lo kizachios. Okay. Now, I have a rhetorical question for you. Well, before the rhetorical question, let me just make my own comment. I think, not that the Gemara needs accolades, but I think the Gemara has established a very fundamental distinction in Hilchos Tshuva, dividing up Tshuva as it were into two fundamentally different categories. That's my introduction to the next question. And here's my next question. How many times does the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva quote these two categories and the distinction between Tshuva mi'ava and Tshuva mi'ira? Zippo. Now, I was taught that the Yisodos of Tshuva, if you want to learn about Tshuva, you don't go to Rabbeinu Yonah, with all due respect, Shari Tshuva, but rather you go to the Rambam. That's how I was brought up. You can argue with me, and then I'll accuse you of not being a brisker, which is okay. I mean, there are worse things that I could call you if you're not a brisker, you know. But, you know, in the Beis Medrash that I come from, the Rambam, especially in Hilchos Tshuva, again, I'm going to try to prove to the world that there's no way of learning Hilchos Talmud Torah without the Rambam. But everybody agrees that it's a davar pashut. Minhag b'chol tfutzis Yisrael, that if you want to know beans about Tshuva, you'll learn the Rambam. In fact, he wasn't exactly my Rebbe, but I used to attend his classes. Rav Yosef Cohen, Zichron Livracha, he taught in a place, an institution called Harry Fischel, if you ever heard of it. And I used to attend his shiurim. He wrote 3 books, a 3-volume work called Sefer Tshuva on the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva, 3 volumes. So Rambam wrote 10 chapters, he wrote 3 books. but it's endless. I mean, the literature on Hilchos Teshuva just doesn't. It's all the Rambam. And I bang my head and my hand on the table, and I ask you, how is it possible that the Rambam omitted this distinction between Teshuva Meira and Teshuva Mi'av? So as I said before, I think a good Jew will ask a second question in order to answer the first question. And that is, and I think the Rav once touched on this, that Perek Zayin Milchas Teshuva starts from scratch. Up until, let's take it, we spoke about the first Roman numeral number 1 was first 4 chapters of Hilchos Teshuva. And we went through the thematic topical definition of each of the 4 chapters. Ad Kana Kofal. That's Teshuva. Now the Rambam in Perek Zayin has a second round of Teshuva. Listen what the Rambam says in Perek Zayin. Gedola Teshuva shemakareves es ha'adam l'shchina. And again, the Rambam could have said this in the first 4 chapters. No, he waits till the 7th chapter. Then he says the following. Hatshuva mekareves es. Did I lose you, Bob? Okay. Oh, you're still there. Okay.
He's just going upstairs.
And David, I may be here. I don't know. Anyway, his smile is certainly.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there he is. In the flesh.
Yes.
You hear this? Tell me something, David. Does this Rambam that I'm about to read you make sense? The Rambam says, Hatshuva mekareves es harachokim. Emesh. What does the word emesh mean?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Emesh hayazeh sonui lifnei hamakom. You know, we're talking about a high-ranking Russia here. Sanui lifnei hamakom. Meshukatz, meruchak, v'toeva. I never knew the Ram had so many adjectives for a Russia. Vayom. What does Hayom mean?
Today.
12 hours later. He does tshuva. 12 hours later. Hu ahuv nechmad v'karav yedid. And he goes on and on, the Rambam. Does this make any sense? Can a person achieve total atonement for his sins overnight? The Rambam in Perek Aleph Milchas Teshuva says the following: you violated a lo taseh, did tshuva, wait for Yom Kippurim. You violated Nisan Kores, you did tshuva, you passed through Yom Kippurim, no kapara. You're going to need kores. You violated Nisan Kores, no kapara, Nisan Misa, no kapara until you get. Basically, what the Ram is telling you is that there's no, here in Israel they call it zbang. I don't know if you ever heard of it. You know, there's no zbang, kapara. You want to make yourself into a tzaddik, you're going to have to wait a while, my friend. You're going to need Malchus, you're going to need Teshuva, you're going to need Yom Kippurim, and so forth and so on. This is the famous brisa called Arba Chaluke Kapar. So how could the Rambam tell me that Emesh, he was Shakutz, Toeva, Meruchak? The Rambam goes on and said, I didn't even read the next Rambam here in Perek Zayin. The Rambam writes also mitzvahs v'torfen also b'fanav. He davens and Hashem throws his tefillas back to him. And now, Hayom, how could it be? The answer is, Rabbosai, that Perek Zayin Milchas Teshuva introduces a brand new category of Teshuva. Whereas the first 4 prakim in the Rambam is addressing Teshuva Meira. Now he has Teshuva Mi'av. Perek Zayin opens up a new chapter in the history of Hilchos Teshuva. Teshuva Mi'av. But the Rambam sandwiches Teshuva Me'ira of the first 4 chapters, with Teshuva Me'av of chapter Zayin, with what? What comes in the middle of the sandwich? Hello, anybody home?
Bechira.
Freedom of choice. How does freedom of choice allow the transition from Teshuva Me'ira to Teshuva Me'av? If we could only solve that problem, then the Rambam shines in his glory, and the Seder HaRambam is rescued. So Rabosai, in the yeshiva, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Bobby.
Do you want an answer?
Yeah. No, I keep talking. It's I have.
I wasn't sure if you're opening up the floor or not. So I would say that the gift of Bechira that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, which makes us, in a sense, like Kaviyachol, God-like, gives us that relationship of Ahava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Once we have Bechira Chofshit, which is such a tremendous chesed and gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that engenders our Ahava.
But
something
yeah, go ahead,
different.
David. Sorry.
Okay, so the Teshuva Me'ira, right, it's kind of like somebody puts a gun to your head, go do act X. So the person does it because he's afraid of being killed. So that's coerced. So that's not really the person wills to do it. He knows what's going to happen if he doesn't. So that's only partial Teshuva. But the Teshuva Me'ava is the guy says, okay, I've done something wrong. I don't see the sword hanging over my head, but I'm doing Teshuva right now anyway to be a better person. That's the real Teshuva, and that's why the Bechira is in the middle.
Excellent. So Bobby, I'll try to repeat what you said, but I'm on the turf with David here, very much so.
Okay.
Let me try to explain. What is the difference between Teshuva Me'ira and Teshuva Me'av? So I mentioned in the yeshiva world, there's a distinction that you could find throughout the literature, especially nowadays, between what's called chitzoniyut and pnimiyut. You're familiar with it. Chitzoniyut means external pressure. Now, when a person does tshuva, I don't want to say statistically, but in most cases, I think it's tshuva me'ira. What do I mean by tshuva me'ira? There's some sort of external pressure that brings about tshuva. I'll give you an example. And this is something my father used to talk about all the time in his rabbinical career. Parents, again, I don't know if you could relate to this. Our frum world is so different than the world of, when my father was a Rav, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But a parent sends a child to the finest schools. And when the child is old enough for university, sends the child to the finest universities. And guess what? Let's say if it's a young man, he comes back with a shiksa. Now again, the father was not, the frummest guy in the world. You wouldn't call him Charedi L'Dvar Hashem. And he sent his son out to wash you, in St. Louis, Missouri, But on the other hand, when he sees this happening in front of his eyes, he completely breaks down. And he bangs himself on the head. And he says, what did I do? How did I make this mistake? That's what I call kishalon, right? The pasuk in Hosea. The derech hachotim is a derech of kishalon. A man cheats in business, and eventually what happens is it boomerangs back against him because he ruins his reputation. So now he decides to go clean, cold turkey, he's going to be a good guy. But again, the tshuva that he does is a result of something external to him. Or, for example, we call pachad of onesh. If a person really believes that God is going to punish you for your sins, at some point it sinks in. But again, it's out of fear of something external to him. I put all the emphasis on the word chitzoniyut. And the Rambam writes that there's something called freedom. In the case of tshuva miyira, the forces that are external to him are so powerful, they bring him to tshuva almost against his will. Or, again, maybe I'm being too extreme. Maybe it's not against his will, but it's certainly not his true inner will that brought him to tshuva. He may come from tshuva of yira to another level of tshuva mi'ava, or he may be able to even skip over the first level of tshuva mi'ira. So what is tshuva mi'ava? Tshuva mi'ava is a pnimius tshuva. This is what the Rambam calls oses ha'emes mipnei ha'emes. He comes to believe in truth. And in a perspective of truth, he realizes that this is not the way. No one is pressuring him. The Rambam holds that Perek Zayin is a tshuva of Bechira Chofshit. It's a tshuva of freedom without any external pressures. That's what tshuva me'ava is. I want to be good because I want to be good. Not because otherwise, daddy is going to patch me and he'll dock me from my allowance this week. No. That's not my motivation for tshuva. This is what I want to be. And if we could add what Bobby said before, I want to be godlike. And that's emes. Says the Rambam, tshuva me'ava, or as we call it, tshuva me'bechira chofshis, could absolutely transform the person. Tshuva me'yira, okay, at this point, he learned his lesson about this, about that, X, Y, Z, and he does tshuva. But he hasn't really transformed himself. He hasn't really come to recognize the emes. He hasn't done a tshuva mipnimius hanefesh. But tshuva mi bechira chofshis is a total transformation of his worldview, of his perspective on everything in life. And now the Rambam asks the following question. Who can do tshuva from midos? I understand in the Maisa tshuva, I look at my chet, I see the kishalon, I do tshuva on my actions, fine. But I haven't really changed myself. That's tshuva me'ira. Can I actually change myself? Before I was a stingy so-and-so, and now I can give out money for tzedakah. Before I would get angry and oversensitive at every single statement, every single thing that happened. And now I'm calm. Until now, I was in a state of nervous tension over everything. Who remembers the days of telegrams? I think I'm revealing my age over here. I remember when we lived in Flatbush in Brooklyn, as a child, I was growing up. If the union, what was it called? I forgot the name of the company now. Something union would knock on the door with a telegram. Everybody in the building. Western Union. That's it. Thanks, David. Western Union. I owe you one. When Western Union knocked on the door, we were ready to sit shiva. Call up the what you would call it, the funeral home, and pay for the tachrikum. That's a state of pachad. To change that, And to recognize the emes for its emes, and that there is, as Rabbi Akiva says, Kol Ma David Rachmana L'Tavavid, that there's a divine perspective, and I don't have to get nervous. I just have to do what I have to do. What kind of transformation does that require? That requires Teshuva Me'ava, Teshuva Bechira Chofshit. So why does the Rambam wait until Perek Zayin to introduce number one, Bechira Chofshit in Prokim Hey and Vav, and number two, in Perek Zayin to introduce the Chiyuv of Teshuva on Deos? And the answer is, once we have freedom of choice, there's a whole new ballgame, a whole new opening, a petach, for a different category of Teshuva, and that's Teshuva Me'ava, Teshuva of Bechira Chofshit, that emanates from the Pnimius. And now, if I can transform my Pnimius, then I can even change my very, very personality and my attributes. If this be the case, Rabbosai, I was thinking that maybe that would shed a light on the Gemara in Kedushin, right? The famous Gemara. Ha'omer le'isha re'at makudesh le'almanah shenitzadek gomur chayshin le'kedushin shema hiro tshuva b'liba. What's going on over here? The Rambam says in Perek Aleph Milchas Tshuva, you can't get kapara until after Malchus, until after Misa, until after Yisurin, and until after Yom HaKippurim, and so forth and so on. And now we're saying shema hiro tshuva b'liba. But I think the answer is that that's the tshuva of Perek Zayin Milchas Tshuva. That's the tshuva me'ava that emanates from a complete transformation of personality, and it's based on freedom of choice, on Bechira Chofshit.
It's interesting that you would say that, because it seems like the marriage itself is the outside choice that's pushing him towards that, right? Would you not
necessarily
say?
You're right. It could be that that's what's happening. He wants to impress her that he's a tzaddik. But the point that I'm trying to make is that Chayshin Kedushin here is based on a very sincere kind of tshuva. And it's interesting that it's a hero tshuva. Where's the vidui, and where's all the others? The Kabbalah Lasid and all this hero tshuva. But maybe the hero tshuva is that all of a sudden he sees the emes. Maybe you're right. Maybe in Shidduchim that could move you. Trouble is, by the way, when a woman converts and she sees the truth, she'll marry a guy, and this I saw in my own lifetime more than once, who's not really frum. And it's such an odd, peculiar setup where she's frum and he's really not. She sees the emes and he doesn't. And she's stuck in that marriage, probably out of desperation. But Memela, we understand why in Perek Zayin the Rambam says that emesh hayashakutz v'toeva osa mitzvahs v'torfim v'fana, and now hayom hu ohu v'nechma, etc., etc. How did it happen overnight? They say about Franz Rosenzweig. Did you ever hear the name? He was a German Jewish philosopher. He wrote a famous book called The Star of Redemption. He was a secular Jew. And for some reason, I don't remember the circumstance, maybe you remember, on one particular Yom Kippur, he passed by a shtibel and he decided he's going to go in. And basically, figuratively at least, he was
ready to convert. He was ready to convert.
Wow.
He said, let me see what's going on in the Jewish.
And basically, he spent 24 hours in the shtibel on Yom Kippur. He came out a different person. So there is such a thing of transformation through Bechira Chofshit, Mipnimius HaNefesh, when you see the truth. And that a human being could be capable of such a transformation is mind-boggling, because we are so entrenched in the way we go and what we do and what we used to. I always quote Mark Twain, the famous American author. He said, to stop smoking. He was a chain smoker. Quit smoking, easy. I did it 1,000 times. But we're so entrenched in what we do that it's so difficult to break from our ways. And now we're talking about a total transformation. Yehi Ratzon, may it be his will, that if we could do Teshuva Meira, fine, that's good enough for me. But possibly, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu be Meir Einenu, we could be Zocha to Teshuva Me'ava, a Teshuva of Bechira Chofshit, and then we'll be Ov and Nechmad in front of the Ribono Shalom. Kehi Ratzon Amen.
Man,
I want to take this
Amen.
opportunity to wish you a good
Sure.
gebenched yard.
Good.
Gemar Chasim
Gemar
Tova.
Chasim Tova
Gemar
to them.
Chasim. And I guess we'll see each other sometime after Sukkot. I
Yep.
always say, don't miss me too much. And that's it. Lots of luck on Yom Kippur.
Amen.
Need for Klal
Thank you.
Yisrael.
Go ahead.
So I don't know if you
Tzom
know,
Kal.
if you know what's going on in Lebanon now, we really need all that tefillas badly, badly.
Yep.